Welcome back to ET with GOTB. The international break has come and gone, and so have some Lionesses. And the England squad for the Euros has dropped. Let's get into it. I'm Rachel.
I'm Sophie.
And this is Extra Time with Girls on the Ball. Okay, we are back a little bit later again because we want to kind of wrap up everything, wrap up the squad announcement, wrap up both of the games in this pod. So there was no kind of point in doing it on Monday. And before we get into all of that, this is your weekly reminder to make sure you are subscribed wherever you listen and wherever you watch your podcasts. Do engage with us there. Give us a like, give us a comment, leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. And also make sure you're following us across all of our social media platforms. We are at Girls on the Ball on everything. Sophie, our last push before maybe a fortnight free of football. What a week or so it has been internationally. How are you feeling after that international break?
Glad it's over. I'm glad of the break. I think I said to you, feels like we've ended the season multiple times over the last 4 weeks. And finally, that end of the season is here. It's been fun, 24-25. But I'm definitely ready. I don't know about you. Definitely ready for that break and for a big summer, hopefully ahead.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know about you, but I feel tired just all the time now. For those of you watching, you can tell obviously we are on different rooms. For those of you listening, maybe we sound slightly different because we are in not just different rooms, different countries. We are on Zoom doing this one. I am, of course, in Ireland. I came across to catch Ireland's last game in Cork, see Louise Quinn's last game in an Ireland shirt. And you are in England. So in case you're wondering what the difference is or why you're doing it on Zoom and we're in two little boxes, that is why. So obviously in today's episode, we're of course going to look back at the fixtures in this window and the various permutations for both the home nations and Ireland. And we will go through the Lionesses squad announcement. Of course, I think you predicted all but one, Sophie, so well done you. We've also got some listener questions that we're going to go through as well. I'm going to try and litter them throughout the episode. But first, we are obviously going to start with the trio who aren't. Both Mary Earps and Fran Kirby announcing their retirement from the England squad with immediate effect, and Millie Bright also ruling herself out of selection for the Euros. I know we touched on Mary in last week's pod, but this has all certainly set the rumour mill alight, it seems, on social media. Some are desperate to attribute these three absences to something bigger and wider and far-reaching. I will say what I said last week, try to avoid speculation. Each of these retirements, or in Millie's case, removal from selection, have all come about in different ways. We touched on Mary last week, but with Fran, I feel like this is always likely to be her last tournament. And with her not being selected, she's chosen to go now. With Millie, it's a completely separate issue, which she's been very open about over the last few weeks and months. From both a physical and mental perspective, she doesn't feel she can give 100% to the team during a major tournament, and has just revealed that she's had a minor operation as well on her knee, I believe. So, at the end of the day, these are all human beings with different reasons for doing what they've done. They're all very personal and big decisions for them to make. So I just encourage you not to latch on to the conspiracies or the narratives, because at the end of the day, we don't know the ins and outs. But it does kind of the topic does lead me to bring in our first couple of listener questions. So one from Shalvi, how is the absence of Kirby, Bright and Earps going to affect the squad at the Euros? And from Jane OS97, how much of a loss is Millie Bright, apart from the obvious leadership pillar she provides?
Yeah, I think what you say, like, you can't conflate the issues. So I completely agree with what you just said there. Until something comes to light, if there would be anything that came to light that there was something different, you can't really merge the issues. And I know there's that inclination to do because they happen in such a short space of time. But I think it's probably the circumstances that have led to that. I maybe prove wrong, but I think from, the Mary Earps thing was individual. Fran Kirby, I think it makes sense. As you say, in terms of her, she's going to retire after the Euros anyway. It's going to be, it's a sad way. I'm sad that I didn't realise on Friday at Wembley that it was the last time I was going to see her in an England shirt. But it's sad that it has happened. But I think she was ready for the end, and I think this just kind of accelerated it by a couple of months, just because she knew she wasn't going. And then, of course, as you said, Millie, I think in terms of the big one I think is, well, Mary Earps is a big one, just in terms of the lack of experience in the goalkeeping unit. I mean, none of those goalkeepers have really major tournament experience. Yes, Hannah Hampton has been to the Euros last time out, 2022, and went to the World Cup as well, but she hasn't played in them. So I think there is there's international football is a kind of different beast. Major tournament football, I mean, is a different kind of beast. So there is a bit of a worry there, and it is always useful to have a number two, an experienced number two behind you. And I think wasn't it Karen Barsley, Rach, on the was it on BBC Five Live or something like that, who was talking about when she basically took Rachel Brown-Finnis's spot as the number one goalkeeper and how important Rachel was to kind of looking after her and nurturing her in and helping her through that transition. And it must be so hard to do. I can imagine that. But yeah, I think there is a gap there. I think Millie though is the big one because she was the starter. She was like the mainstay in that central defensive area. That's not to say that England don't have cover in that position. They do, and I think in Alex Greenwood they have a left-sided centre back, which adds, some really good attributes that you might not have with Millie. And that's not to say Millie wasn't great; she is brilliant. But just to say that could be a difference, that could be a positive that we could see in the tournament rather than a negative. And I think off the pitch as well, that leadership side of things, we know how big a leader Millie is, both for club and for country. She is that one who really takes the mantle on and leads by example. And I think she's done that for very many years. And there will be a hole inevitably because of that. But then you also, I mean, I think Serena Wiegman will look at her squad and say, well, I've got lots of experience still. I've got Lucy Bronze, I've got Kira Walsh, I've got Georgia Stanway, and I've got Leah Williamson, all in that kind of leadership environment. Alessia Russo is pretty much there now. I would say Ella Toon is getting there as well. I know they're still young, but they've been around the squad a long time at this point. So there's plenty of people that she can pull on for those kind of needing to guide them through and steer them through a major tournament.
Absolutely. We've had a couple of questions about whether something has gone down in the dressing room, etc. And again, as I said earlier, nobody in the media knows the full ins and outs of everything that's gone on. But as I said, yeah, they've all made these decisions for very different reasons. So I'd avoid jumping to conclusions. We had a few questions about the calendar and burnout, something that we've spoken about before. So do you think we might see more of this before the Euros, not hopefully from England, but generally? Or do you think with no World Cup or Euros next summer, like having that bit of a break, is it just a case of getting this out of the way? Obviously, there have been other tournaments around the world, but with COVID squashing everything together, it's felt like these last 5 years have been jam-packed, and
It's
2026
been
might be a calm time.
Yeah, it's been an incredibly intense period, and I know England, well, Team GB didn't go to the Olympics last year, but it's still been an incredibly packed period for women's football. Things have escalated beyond, they went from gradually climbing that hill, I guess. Well, maybe a bit more steep climbing the hill, but like I mean, it's been 8 years since it went professional in the league or something like that, maybe 9. So it's not been a long time at all. It's been a massive increase in minutes, in time,
Loading,
in loading, in the stuff
travel.
around the game, not just the travel, but the sponsorships, all of the stuff that you have to do, the media. There's been a massive increase, and it literally feels like it's gone from 0 to 100 at points. And I think certainly since the pandemic, since COVID, when you have back-to-back tournaments, we're in the last of that back-to-back one. I think it's felt like a really long slog at this point, and I think, yeah, next year will be really, really valuable for these players to have a break over the summer. Hopefully, they'll get a proper break, most of them. But I think, yeah, you can start to see the kind of the wear and tear a little bit. You've seen it in the injuries that England have suffered in the last 2 years. The amount of players that have been out: Alex Greenwood, Lauren Hemp, Georgia Stanway in the last 6 months or so.
LJ
Before
now.
that, you've got Beth Mead, Leah Williamson, Millie Bright had a knee injury before going to the World Cup, and then a knee injury afterwards. I think there have been significant issues because of the loading on players. And the problem is, other than non-tournament years, I think it's only going to get bigger because we have FIFA introducing these two new tournaments that they want to introduce, the Champions Club Cup and the Club World Cup as well. UEFA have their Nations League that they want to start implementing a lot. We have eventually the Europa Club will get bigger. I think the demands are going to get bigger on these players' bodies, and no one is really doing much about it. And I know England and club could be doing a lot more maybe to rest players, but ultimately, at the end of the day, Serena Wiegmann, for example, is there to win football games for England and to win the Nations League for England or whatever it might be, the Euros. And why should she be the one? She would feel, I would imagine, why should I be the one to rest the players when my job is on the line to be successful for England,
And
right?
also, international breaks are every 6 weeks.
Yeah.
They're not every week. So, it has to be a combination of both club and national team to
She's
rest where
got
possible. But
She's got to go into every
arguably,
single camp to put out her best 11 with the fit players that she has. And that's not to saying she's risking players, but in terms of loading, it means that when, I don't know, Millie Bright is fit, she's going to be playing every single game. And that's that's the problem because there are just so many games of football.
yeah, and I think arguably if 70% of your footballing career is played at club, then the weight of loading management, more of that should fall on club than on national team. But that's not to say when possible teams shouldn't rotate, but I just find Wiegman gets way more stick than league managers do for whatever reason.
Ultimately,
Um,
it's the fault of UEFA, FIFA, and the federations. They are the ones who are in charge of the scheduling. They are the ones with the power to make it easier for these coaches to rest players or give them, time off and stuff like that, or have proper breaks in the summer and stuff like that. And they just don't do it. And I mean, I put it on Twitter today. UEFA having 26 players for the men's Euros and 23 players for the women's Euros is like ridiculous. Why can't they take 26 players to the Euros? That would, this whole Fran Kirby thing wouldn't have happened if that was the case. So yeah,
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to move on to the action now. Firstly, England beating Portugal 6-0. Aggie Beever-Jones with the hat trick, Lucy Bronze, Beth Mead, and Chloe Kelly getting on the score sheet. A stellar start, Hemp back looking better than ever, and minutes for Greenwood and Stanway. So all positive signs. There was, I think Karen Bardsley called it vintage England. There was a feeling of vintage England, wasn't there? And look, Portugal didn't play great, but this is not a team that England seemed to do very well against very often. It was two draws and a 1-0 win in the last three games. So to come out in the way they did, with everything that's going on behind the scenes, it was a really good performance.
it was. And I always get a little bit annoyed because when people say, well, the opposition were rubbish. And it always seems to be the case when England win a game of football.
Yeah, it's not because England were good.
It's like the opposition weren't up to scratch. Or even like when Arsenal beat Barcelona the other day. It was because Barcelona weren't at their best. Or when England beat Spain. Spain were just not at the best. There's no credit really given to England. And
Yeah.
yes, Portugal weren't great. They are on a bit of a downward slump at the moment. They really, really miss Kika Nazareth, I think. She is like the glue that holds them together. She's their playmaker. She is the spark that kind of ignites them when they're going forward. But at the same time, England did really, really well to nullify anything that Portugal might provide. And we saw how difficult they were in February when England went to Portugal and they really struggled to break them down. And Portugal did try to, be compact again, did try to bank up a little bit, make themselves hard to break down. And they just had the players this time in Aggie Beever-Jones, in Beth Mead, and then, Chloe Kelly coming to the bench to really unlock them. And I think a lot of credit should be given where it's due. It was a really
Yeah.
good performance. You don't win 6-0 in international football very often. I know England have done it twice in the last 2 months. They beat Belgium as well, but it doesn't happen all that often. So I think you do need to give them credit. They put on a really good display. It was an English display, as Karen Barsley said, and I think they just need that consistency a little bit more. But I've always said England are a tournament team. I do
Yeah.
think that consistency comes in tournaments for them.
And conversely, then England were beaten 2-1 by Spain, Russo and Pina with a brace. Um, and the same thing happens where when Spain win, it's because England were terrible, miles off it. Spain ran them over, etc., etc. Now, it was a good first half from England. There was rotation in the second half. Clinton wasn't available. Toon and Bronze are on managed minutes. So they looked that little bit less confident. You were bringing in players who were getting their first cap in midfield, um, against Spain, and Missy Bulkaran's coming in there, talk about throwing a player in at the deep end, and sometimes from the commentary perspective, I know this really winds you up. That context just isn't provided, and immediately the narrative is miles better, ran over, couldn't get a touch of the ball, banked in their own half, and you're like, but that's gonna like you're gonna play against Spain, you're not gonna have possession. Why does that then become the stick to beat England with when they don't have possession? You know that's gonna happen. It's how good you are out of possession that makes you perform well, if you like.
Spain were very, very good in that second half,
Yes.
and they did take control. They took control of the midfield area, which is key. Their midfield trio of Atanable, Mati, Patry, and Alexia Putellas are the best in Europe. We know that collectively they're best in
In the
Europe,
world.
and it's well, yeah, in the world, and it's how you stifle them that matters. And for England, in the first half, they managed to stifle them a lot more. They were packing the midfield a bit more. They were forcing them wide. They were keeping it quite tight, and they were cutting down the spaces. And for a bit in the first half, Spain lost their head because after the goal was scored, which they thought was a foul on Salma, it wasn't a foul, but they just stopped. And it's a really, really good counter-attack move from England straight to Alessia Russo. The two centre backs for Spain can't handle a direct runner at them. They just can't deal with it. That's what you've got to do against Spain. You've got to hit them on the counter. And I think Leah Williamson said it in post-match. They just didn't do that in the second half. But they know what they need to do. They know how to fix it. It's just
Also,
they
they
weren't.
know there's reasons why the
Yeah,
midfield.
so the midfield became disjointed, and I do think having to take Stanway off was a massive, massive issue. She was really, really good in the first half, but she has to be looked after for the Euros. Lucy Bronze came off, another one who was like
No
protecting that
Toon,
right
no
side.
Clinton on the bench. Like no
Yeah,
Toon, sorry,
no,
being managed. No Clinton on the bench.
yeah, Clinton was unavailable because of yellow cards. Toon is being managed for minutes. It left Jess Park having to play most of the game in the 10 role, and she was doing a lot of the grunt work, which she's a brilliant player, but the kind of the gritty side of the game isn't her ballpark. It's more the ball playing creative
Yeah.
side of the game. And yeah, Serena had a lack of options, and I think you saw that by the fact that she made substitutions quite early. The fact that she is thinking about the Euros, she's trying to manage load and minutes, and I have nothing against her putting Missy Kearns on. It's a really good time to see a player, give her a chance, give her a debut. As you say, sink or swim against the best players in the world. She struggled a bit, inevitably, as any young player would do in that situation. But she will have learnt so much from that experience. But I just don't really look at the whole 90 minutes as a whole negative on England. On another day, and if they meet in the tournament, it's going to be a completely different game of football. I think a different situation, different context, different players, and England do have every chance. They've shown they can beat them, so they have every chance of doing it again. That's not to say it's not tough. They are the best team in the world right now, but yeah, it's
A lot,
just.
a lot was made of it, which just felt a bit like it was lacking in
It was
the
like it was a
necessary
report
context.
card on where England are at, and I think
Yeah,
that's taking away all of the good that's been done as well as the bad that's been done in the last 6 months.
yeah. Um, We have another couple of questions kind of on this. First from Layla, the commentary said fitness was an issue against Spain, but their season hasn't ended yet. And another from Charlene Catty, midfield looks incredibly thin. How do we not get run over like Spain did on us a few days ago? Now, as I said, both of us get quite irritated about the expectation of England to have loads of possession against a team like Spain and how often that context then is excluded from the coverage. Like, well, I mean, guess what do you make of those questions? And I think when you look at the commentary was driving you a little bit mad, because fitness isn't an issue for England. That's an unusual kind
Yeah,
of
I think fitness is an
excuse.
issue. Fitness is an issue in terms of we've got players coming back to full fitness. When you look at Georgia Stanway, Ella Toon, who wasn't, on managed minutes, Lauren Hemp and Alex Greenwood, they've all come back from long-term injuries. And at this point, they've been playing their first minutes. Well, certainly for Georgia Stanway, that was her first 45 minutes in 6 months. So she's going to take a little bit of time to get match fit. By the first game of the tournament, I expect her to be much further along than she is now in terms of that fitness. And they'll have another game against Jamaica where they can get those match minutes in. And I'm sure there'll be, behind closed doors friendlies and a lot of competitive training to get them, up to speed. I'm not worried about the fitness as such. I think actually it could turn out that they are probably the freshest bunch because they have, once they are, up to speed, they haven't had, so much loading on them that they are burning out. So for me,
Also, it's bloody tiring running without the ball, which is what you do against Spain. You have to be playing out of possession, shifting constantly, being switched on. That is a tiring type of football to play.
and when it's ultimately, yes, I mean, the Nations League is the Nations League, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's a glorified friendly and you've got bigger fish to fry in 5 weeks' time. I mean, that's what matters, right? It's the Euros
That
that
was my
matter. It's
next
not, it's not the Nations League.
that was my next point. England didn't qualify for the semi-finals of the Nations League, but really it's not that big a deal, is it? Because the main thing is they used these games to learn a lot and it was necessary ahead of the Euros. That was the priority.
And it means that in the autumn we get some potentially different friendlies against
Hey,
non-European teams.
not
Maybe
Belgium,
we
not
get to go.
Netherlands, not
Maybe we
Spain.
get to travel away. I don't know. England don't tend to like to do that, but I certainly imagine another friendly with the USA is on the cards. I know the USA miss playing European teams because they can't now, but very often because of the Nations League. So
Yeah.
there will be opportunities, maybe Brazil, who knows, for those kind of games to happen, and that's going to serve them, I think, with way better than it would playing Spain, Germany, France, or
Netherlands,
Sweden
Belgium.
again for the 200th time.
Yeah. Okay, looking at the home nations, Scotland and Wales were both relegated from League A in this window. But I do think, looking at the results more broadly, I think there are some positives to take. It's always going to be a tough ask in this league. Um, there was definite improvement from Scotland in their second match against the Dutch. Like, you must remember they've got a new manager. It's going to take time to get her ideas embedded in. And also something she touched on, shaking off the negativity of the kind of last few years under Pedro and, that almost habit of losing or underperforming and shaking that off. And I think that's something they're very keen to do. So that's one thing
She
I'd say
needs
about,
she needs time.
yeah.
I think it's been, I don't know how many podcasts we did where we were talking about Pedro Martinez Lopez and how he shouldn't be in the job and how they shouldn't have offered him a new contract. And, that's going to take a little time to get away the cobwebs from that, to wipe away kind of the scars from that, the scars from not qualifying for major tournaments as well. That's going to be hard for them to carry. There will be some players who move out of that squad, some players who move in. It's going to be a bit of a rebuild for Melissa, I think. So she needs to be given time, and I think League B is the perfect place to do that. From League B, you can still have a shot at qualifying for the World Cup, no problem. If you get yourself in the right position for the playoffs. So I think, yeah, she just needs to be given a little bit of space and time to figure out what she needs to do with that squad to make it productive.
And similarly, Wales, you can also see that they're building well under Rianne. The last game against Italy was always going to be tough for them, having already been relegated. But across the other games, nicking points, making it tough for their opponents, they'll learn a lot from that, which will be key going into the Euros.
Yeah, I think I said this to someone earlier, like the problem is you don't want that result right now. I think you'd want that 4-1 result earlier in the Nations League. You don't want to end the Nations League, possibly their last game before the major tournament, on that 4-1 defeat that, in that first half, they kind of fell apart a bit, the 4 goals in the first half. Um, yeah, they will need to reflect on that a bit because it is a bit chastening, maybe. They were feeling quite confident about the way that they'd, control game, well, kept scorelines narrow against opposition that were much, higher ranked than them in the other games. And I'm sure that they can still do that, but at the same time, they want to be a little bit careful that, that doesn't become a pattern about what happened on Tuesday.
Well, listen, same group, same thing happened to Denmark, 6-1 against Sweden in their final game. That was an absolute battering. So yeah, not ideal. But I'm sure plenty will be learned. Northern Ireland, meanwhile, in League B, have guaranteed themselves a playoff spot after drawing with Bosnia Herzegovina. So again, another side that needs a bit of time to rebuild under Tanya Oxtoby. Right, Ireland. I was in Cork for the final game against Slovenia. where they needed to win by a 4 goal margin. Frustratingly, I actually think they could have done it. I think they played well enough to do it. They dominated the game. They only won 1-0, but I think probably their best performance under Carla Ward, actually. I just think they're lacking that quality and composure up front at the moment for whatever reason. And they did make some changes to the way that the team played, and I think they looked a little bit more confident in defence as well. But Slovenia always just made me nervous every time they went forward. But they could have won by more, and it's frustrating they didn't because they certainly created enough chances to do that. But the main thing is they've still got a playoff spot. And I believe the playoff options are Denmark, Belgium, Iceland, and Austria. So no easy games there. Neve has asked Sophie on Instagram for some help working out what it means for Ireland now in terms of playoffs and World Cup qualification. And I was chatting to a couple of people at breakfast in the hotel the following morning who similarly thought that was it for the World Cup. And I think it was because some of the media over here made out that this was a do or die situation, which was really unusual because it's
Some of them
absolutely
over
not.
here did too. I can't remember who it was who printed that the top four qualified for the World Cup in the League A, and I was like, no, that's not happening, not yet. That's next round. So yeah, Ireland still have every chance of qualifying for the World Cup. Yes, they might have wanted to be. Well, first of all, they've got a playoff, so in
It
the
can still be
autumn,
in League A.
if if they win that playoff, which I believe is 2 legs, they could get to League A for World Cup qualifying, and then it would be exactly the same process as what happened in the last time out in League A, where as long as you can finish fourth in the group and you still get into the playoffs for the World Cup qualifying, and you play a League B team within that. In League B, you can do the same. You can, win League B or come second, I think, and still be in the playoffs in terms of getting a chance at World Cup qualifying. So all is not lost, that's for sure. There's still plenty of opportunity for it to happen, whether they go a direct way or a long way around. Who knows? But there is definitely lots of opportunity there for them to still get there.
Don't panic, guys. Okay, finally, so let's have a quick chat through the England squad announcement, which happened today.
I was just
Goalkeepers, Hannah.
thinking, did we actually talk about the England squad? And then I was
No,
realised it was
we're
coming.
getting there. Goalkeepers, Hannah Hampton, Kiara Keating, Anna Moorhouse. Defenders, Lucy Bronze, Leah Williamson, Jess Carter, Alex Greenwood, Lotte Wubben-Moy, Esme Morgan, Neve Charles, and Maya Letizier. Midfielders, Ella Toone, Georgia Stanway, Kira Walsh, Grace Clinton, and Jess Park. Forwards, Lauren Hemp, Lauren James, Chloe Kelly, Beth Mead, Michelle Adjumang, Alessia Russo, and Aggie Beaver Jones. Now, there has been some nervousness around the midfield looking light. Part of me thinks it's also because LJ gets put in with the forwards when we know she can also play in the 10. So you have that option too. Probably no huge surprises there, except perhaps for Michelle Adjumang. With Fran and Millie no longer being available, it kind of threw up a few questions as to how those gaps would be filled. I guess many thought that the extra call up would be a midfielder. We did too, because the under-19s are happening in the summertime, and we assumed Michelle Adjumang would be considered more important for that team, and will be playing there. But no, she's the one that's filled the extra spot that we were unsure of. And that, yes, there's some concern over midfield and it being a bit light, but
I
a
think
pretty expected squad.
I think Serena surprised everyone with that choice, not because Michelle Adjumang isn't talented and doesn't, I fully expect her to go to the Euros, soak up every bit of it, and if she comes on, she could make a real impact. And I expect her to get a few minutes here and there. I think she is that impact player off the bench. She is something different to the other forwards that England have as well. But I think it was a surprise because none of us expected Serena to go there. History says that maybe she would have gone either for the more experienced Nikita Paris or for a midfield cover in that area. But I think it's a brave decision. It certainly shows what Michelle's done in training in the last since she's come in. She came in April in that second game against Belgium, scored that goal, but obviously has impressed enough to be considered viable to take to a major tournament. So I think it's going to be a huge learning experience for her, and I do kind of get it over Paris in a way. I know Nikita's had a really really good season at Brighton, but she's not going to be in the cycle in the next 2 years, for the World Cup. It will be the likes of Michelle Adjumang. And if anyone who's watched Michelle coming through, whether it's at Arsenal, at Brighton this season, or with the young Lionesses, we all know that she is that talent. She is the one who's really, really stood out in her age groups all the way through. So, yeah, brilliant news for her. Great opportunity, huge learning opportunity. And it could be really interesting because she goes to the Euros this summer. If her under-19s team can do the job for her in Poland in a couple of weeks' time, she might go to an under-20s World Cup next year, and then she could be going to the World Cup in Brazil the year after.
2027.
And by the age of what, 21 years old or something, she will be have done three. She could have done three major tournaments. Yeah, one youth level, one and two major tournaments, and that's incredible experience for her, and it's only going to serve her brilliantly as she gets older.
Absolutely. I did find some of the conversations on Twitter bizarre. Some people claiming players are missing, or it's a terrible squad, or it's Serena's favourites. And yet I've not seen any suggestions of who is missing, who should be going instead. There's this idea floating around in some elements of social media that there are a bunch of 23 young players that are world class, Euros winning potential, just being ignored and sidelined, and no one's talking to bring them into the
It's the
squad.
magic
It's such
unicorn
a
player.
it's such a
It's always
weird
the way, and I
take.
think it's the same with any squad anywhere. There's always this desire for something different. And actually, when you look at England's squad, they're not particularly old. 13
There
of
are
the squad,
seven players making their major tournament debut.
13 of them were with the squad at Euro 2022. But they're not old players as such. They're still kind of in their
In their
prime,
prime.
and they're bringing in that kind of experience, and that's kind of what you want. And there has been different to what some people say. Serena does bring young players through. She might take her time sometimes with them, but like Aggie, she took her time with Aggie, getting her into her debut and all of that. But she's got her there now, where Aggie is now in a really good place to be the backup number 9 for Alessia Russo. So she does bring players through. She does give opportunities. You look at the likes of what has happened in the last 12 months. Grace Clinton, Jess Park, Hannah Hampton's become number 1. All of them have cemented their places within the setup, within the squad. And, they're kind of, when you're getting a squad announcement, they're kind of the first people, well, not the first people, but they're amongst a bunch of people that are going, if they are fit, they're going to be in the squad, they're going to be named. So, yeah, I think there is a lot to be excited about. Yes, there are some worries. Yes, the midfield area is a little bit light.
Hmm.
Yes, England's defensive performances on transition can be tricky at times. And how do you get Kira Walsh, effective in a midfield area? They are all
Who's
problems
her
that need to be
replacement if
looked.
she gets injured?
They're all problems that need to be looked at, but equally there is as much, I think, excitement about this team when you look at, the people who could be coming off the bench, the people who are now the Alessia Russo and Ella Toons of the world, Aggie Beaver-Jones, Michelle Adjemang, those players coming off the bench, making a difference. I think there's a lot to be excited about.
Yeah. So less disaster class, please, guys. Anyway, hopefully that is the end of the drama surrounding the Lionesses in the build-up to the Euros.
Touch
They will
wood, I
play.
can't do anymore. It's just
They will play Jamaica in a friendly before heading out to Switzerland. But hopefully everyone will get maybe a little bit of a break if they're lucky, which would be
Yeah, I
nice.
think it said they're back in camp on like the 13th or 15th of June or something like that. So they've got a couple of weeks where they can just purely like
One
take
week
some time
off.
off.
Enjoy it,
Um,
guys.
well, yeah,
Um,
1 week then, but like get some proper rest, go get some sunshine. And then I imagine when they come back into camp, it's like what they've used to do, where they have them in for 4 days and then send them
yeah.
home at weekends. So
Any other business? Anything else you want to touch on? So, what have I forgotten?
that Sheffield United are going to be playing in the Barclays WSL2 next season.
The championship.
Yes, the championship.
I'm not doing
They've been
it.
given like a reprieve from their relegation. Obviously, they came bottom, got relegated, but because of Blackburn Rovers being their owners being
Shit,
shit, for want of a better word, I was trying to think of a better word,
there
uh,
isn't one.
uh, and citing financial problems, Sheffield United have been allowed back into the to make it up to 12-team championship WSL2 that we really needed last year. It's no good being an 11-team side,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah. We will look to finally close the lid on the WSL season in our pods in the coming weeks. We'll do a two-parter where we'll go through each team and grade them, and ideally I'll remember all of the teams this time, before we start our build-up to the Euros. So,
I've got
um,
any other business.
oh, go on.
Rachel Furness retired today, announced her retirement.
Oh, I didn't see that.
And I just wanted to say what a legend for Northern Ireland and just a legend in general. One of, supreme career. It had her injury issues, but she has been one of the like leading lights, especially for Northern Ireland. And yeah, kudos on
She
a
will be
huge
missed.
career.
Congratulations. That is it from us. We'll be back again early next week. We'll do a live on Instagram on Sunday this week, I think, because we've been skiving off those the last couple of weekends
Just last
for
weekend.
good reasons. Did we do one when we were in Lisbon?
Yeah, we did one on Monday night.
Did we?
Yeah, when
Oh,
we
so I
were
can't
back.
remember that. Anyway, guys, it's Thursday, if I'm right. So I'm not going to say have a good week. I'm going to say have a good weekend, and we will chat to you again very soon.